Picture this. It is 1950. The world is trying to dust itself off from the absolute chaos of the 1940s, and the automotive industry is in a weird, wild transitional phase. Over in Germany, the economy is essentially running on hopes, dreams, and scavenged scrap metal. Amidst this post-war scramble, a company named Veritas decides they are going to build a car. But not just any car. They are going to build the 1950 Dyna Veritas, a vehicle that perfectly answers a question absolutely no one was asking. It is a car with a French heart, a German suit, the sound of an angry sewing machine, and the top speed of a particularly motivated house cat. Before we dive into the hilariously weird history of this beautiful disaster, do me a massive favor. Hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and ring the notification bell. It feeds the algorithm, which, much like the car we are talking about today, runs on a highly unpredictable combination of hot air, strange engineering, and blind optimism. Thank you. Now let's get into it. To understand the Dyna Veritas, you first have to understand the absolute madness of the company that built it. Veritas was founded just after World War II by three German guys, Ernst Loof, Georg Meyer, and Lorenz Dietrich. These were not your average guys tinkering in a shed. Ernst Loof was the former head of BMW's racing department. Georg Meyer was a legendary motorcycle racing champion. Lorenz Dietrich was a businessman who apparently looked at the smoking rubble of post-war Germany and thought, you know what this economy needs? Very expensive, highly bespoke race cars. Because BMW's factories were largely destroyed or sitting in the newly formed Soviet occupation zone, our trio couldn't just go back to their old jobs. So they did what any enterprising gearheads would do. They started scavenging. They went around buying up pre-war BMW 328 chassis and engines, stripped them down to their bare souls, and rebuilt them into sleek, aerodynamic racing cars under the name Veritas. And against all odds, these cars were incredible. They dominated early post-war German racing. They looked like silver UFOs and drove like absolute dreams. Veritas was winning trophies, making headlines, and building a reputation as the coolest new manufacturer on the block. There was just one tiny, microscopic problem with their brilliant business model. They were going completely broke. As it turns out, building low-volume, handcrafted racing cars out of scavenged pre-war BMWs for a population that is currently using cigarettes as currency is not a recipe for immense financial wealth. The racing program was a money pit. Lorenz Dietrich, the businessman of the group, looked at the company's ledger, which was basically just a piece of paper with a frowny face drawn on it, and realized they needed a volume seller. They needed a small, affordable passenger car to generate cash so they could keep playing with their fun race cars. But Veritas didn't have the time, the money, or the machinery to design a small car from scratch. They needed a shortcut. So Dietrich looked across the border to France. Now, bear in mind, this is just a few years after World War II. The geopolitical tension between France and Germany was still so thick you could cut it with a baguette. But Dietrich swallowed his pride and knocked on the door of the French automaker Panhard. At the time, Panhard was making a little car called the Dyna X. The Dyna X was a brilliant piece of engineering wrapped in a body that was objectively horrifying. It was so weird-looking that the French public nicknamed it the Louis XV pig. However, beneath its bulbous, weirdly styled exterior, the Dyna X had a front-wheel drive layout, independent suspension, and a tiny but incredibly clever air-cooled flat-twin engine. Dietrich proposed a deal. Veritas would buy the rolling chassis and engines of the Panhard Dyna X, ship them to Germany, and put their own beautiful, stylish bodies on them. Panhard agreed, and thus the unholy Franco-German alliance was born, resulting in the Dyna Veritas. Let us take a moment to appreciate the anatomy of this Frankenstein's monster of an automobile. Underneath, you have the French Panhard chassis. Up front, you have a 744cc air-cooled flat twin. For those of you not intimately familiar with engine displacement, 744cc's is roughly the size of a large bottle of fancy sparkling water. This mighty two-cylinder powerhouse produced a mind-bending, earth-shattering 32 horsepower. That is not a typo, 32. To put that into perspective, a modern ride-on lawnmower could probably give the Dyna Veritas a run for its money in a quarter-mile drag race. But what the Dyna Veritas lacked in raw, face-melting speed, it made up for in sheer, unadulterated style. Remember, Veritas was a company that built sleek, aerodynamic race cars. They couldn't just put a boring box on top of this French sassy. They hired the renowned German coach builder Baur, located in Stuttgart, to design and build the bodies. Baur delivered a masterpiece. They built a pontoon-style, curvous, beautiful, drop-dead, gorgeous convertible body that made the car look like $1,000,000. It had sweeping fenders, a sleek front grille, and an elegant, sloping rear end. If you squinted, it looked like a shrunken-down Jaguar XK120 or a miniature luxury Grand Touring. It was a car that screamed speed, wealth, and sophistication. And that was the ultimate comedic tragedy of the Dyna Veritas. It was a vehicle suffering from a massive automotive identity crisis. You'd walk up to this stunning, sleek convertible, expecting it to harbor a roaring straight six that could tear up the Autobahn. You'd slide into the beautifully crafted interior, grip the elegant steering wheel, put on your finest driving goggles and turn the key, and instead of a mighty roar, the engine would start up and go put. It sounded exactly like a giant mechanical duck. Because it was a two-cylinder, air-cooled engine, it was incredibly loud and clattery, and because it only had 32 horsepower pushing a steel body, the performance was completely disconnected from the styling. The top speed was around 120 kilometers or about 75 miles per hour, but getting there required the length of an entire airport runway and a very strong tailwind. Imagine driving through the German countryside looking like James Bond, but getting aggressively overtaken by a farmer on a rusty bicycle carrying a sack of potatoes. That was the Dyna Veritas experience. But the lack of speed wasn't even the biggest issue. The real nail in the coffin for the Dyna Veritas was the price. Remember, the whole point of this project was to build a cheap, affordable car for the masses to save the company from bankruptcy. But by the time Veritas bought the sassies from France, shipped them to Germany, paid a premium coach builder to handcraft stunning steel bodies, and assembled the whole thing, the costs had skyrocketed. When the Dyna Veritas officially hit the market in 1950, it was priced roughly around 8,300 Deutschmarks. For context, a standard Volkswagen Beetle at the time cost about 4,000 Deutschmarks. So Veritas was asking people to pay more than double the price of a Beetle for a car that had fewer cylinders, less space, and sounded like a broken washing machine. All because it looked really, really pretty. Unsurprisingly, even German car-buying public who were still recovering from a devastating war and trying to figure out how to pay for groceries did not rush to their local Veritas dealerships to throw their life savings at a two-cylinder optical illusion. It was a brilliant idea on paper that translated into a massive commercial flop in the real world. Veritas managed to produce the car from 1950 to about 1952. In that time, they built roughly 176 units. That is not a daily production number, that is the entire production run, 176. They also offered a hardtop coupe version, but almost everyone opted for the cabriolet because if you're gonna go that slow, you might as well get a tan while you're doing it. The financial return from the Dyna Veritas was nowhere near enough to save the company. The massive development costs, the expensive coach building, and the abysmal sales figures essentially acted as an anvil tied to the ankles of a drowning company. By 1952, Veritas had completely run out of money. The company went bankrupt, the doors were locked, and the dream of the pre-war BMW scavengers came to an abrupt and unceremonious end. Ernst Loof eventually went back to work for BMW, Georg Meyer went back to his motorcycle businesses, and Lorenz Dietrich presumably went off to pitch terrible financial ideas to someone else. Today, the 1950 Dyna Veritas is an incredibly rare and highly sought-after collector's item, because only 176 were ever made, and because many of them rusted away or were scrapped for parts over the decades. Finding one in the wild is like finding a unicorn that speaks French but wears lederhosen. When they do pop up at high-end classic car auctions, they sell for astronomical amounts of money. Modern collectors absolutely love them because they represent a specific crazy moment in automotive history. Looking back, you have to respect the sheer audacity of the Dyna Veritas. It's a monument to the ridiculous optimism of car enthusiasts. Three guys with no money thought they could take the guts of a bizarre French economy car, dress it up in a bespoke German tuxedo, and sell it for a massive premium to a population that was barely getting by. It was a terrible business decision, a bizarre engineering mashup, and a complete failure. But man, did it look good doing it. And maybe that's the true legacy of the Dyna Veritas. It reminds us of a time when the car industry wasn't run by focus groups and wind tunnel data, but by madmen in sheds trying desperately to piece together a dream. It's a slow, loud, two-cylinder testament to the fact that sometimes making absolutely no sense is the best way to be remembered.